Picture this. March 1999, Geneva Motor Show. Lamborghini, a company famous for building cars that looked like spaceships but had the reliability of a chocolate teapot, unveils something impossible. The Diablo GT, carbon fiber everywhere. A roof scoop that looks stolen from a GT2 race car and somehow works. And a naturally aspirated V12 screaming to 7,100 RPM. 83 units, Europe only. Claimed 215 miles per hour. The fastest road-going Diablo Lamborghini would ever build. And here's the kicker. It actually worked. Yes, you heard that right. Italian supercar worked. I checked the calendar. Hell had not in fact frozen over. The Italians just built something brilliant. This wasn't a parts bin special. This was a homologation project, built to qualify the Diablo GTR for GT1 class racing. To make that happen, Lamborghini needed to build road-legal versions, 83 of them, all hand-assembled, all left-hand drive, all allocated exclusively to European markets. The man responsible for signing off on the GT's development? Valentino Balboni, Lamborghini's legendary test driver. The same man who'd been throwing Countachis sideways through Italian mountain roads since the 1970s. If Balboni approved it, you knew it wasn't going to be a gentle experience. The GT launched in March 1999 at the Geneva Motor Show. By that point, Lamborghini had already changed hands, again. Chrysler had sold the company to Megatech in 1994. Megatech then sold it to Audi in September 1998, which means the GT was conceived, developed, and finalized under Italian and Indonesian ownership, then launched under the new German parent company. Timing matters. We'll come back to that. The GT wasn't just a Diablo with a body kit. Lamborghini gutted the car, carbon fiber doors, carbon fiber hood, carbon fiber engine cover, carbon fiber rear diffuser. The Italians discovered that carbon fiber exists and used it everywhere structurally possible. The result? Curb weight dropped to somewhere between 1,460 and 1,480 kilograms, roughly 3,200 to 3,260 pounds. For context, a standard Diablo VT weighed closer to 3,700 pounds. That's 500 pounds lighter, in a car that was already offensively light by modern standards. The GT wasn't a diet, it was surgical weight removal. Power came from Lamborghini's 6.0-liter naturally aspirated V12. 575 horsepower at 7,100 RPM, 465 pound-feet of torque at 5,500 RPM. No turbochargers, no superchargers, no hybrid systems, no electronic aids beyond basic fuel injection and ignition timing. Just 12 cylinders, 48 valves, and Italian engineering doing what it does best, making noise and power in equal measure. Transmission was a 5-speed manual, rear-wheel drive only. No all-wheel drive system. No traction control at launch, though later examples received a basic system. No launch control. No driver aids whatsoever. You controlled 575 horsepower with your right foot, a clutch pedal, and whatever driving skill you brought to the table. If you got it wrong, the GT let you know, immediately and without mercy. The numbers tell the story. Quattroute magazine tested the GT in May 2000, 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 3.9 seconds. 3.9. That's roughly equivalent to a sub-4-second 0 to 60 sprint from a naturally aspirated engine in 1999. Let me repeat that for the people in the back. The Italians, the same people who brought you electrical systems designed by someone who'd clearly never seen electricity, built a naturally aspirated V12 that hit 60 miles per hour quicker than most modern hot hatches with turbochargers and launch control. I hate how much I love this. Top speed was claimed at 215 miles per hour. Period testing suggested the GT could genuinely achieve 210 to 215 miles per hour in the right conditions, making it one of the fastest production cars available in 1999. The quarter mile? Contemporary estimates put it in the low 11-second range at over 120 miles per hour. Not independently verified by major publications, but consistent with the GT's power-to-weight ratio and period testing data. The chassis was pure Diablo. Tubular steel space frame, revised for the GT with reinforced mounting points for the aggressive aerodynamics. The suspension geometry remained familiar, but spring rates went up, dampers stiffened, and the entire package was tuned for one purpose: maximum speed with controllable handling at the limit. Front suspension, double wishbones, coilover dampers, anti-roll bar. Rear suspension, double wishbones, coilover dampers, anti-roll bar. Brakes, ventilated discs all around, significantly larger than standard Diablo specification. Wheels were forged magnesium, 18 inches up front, 18 inches rear. Tires were Pirelli P0 performance rubber, sized appropriately for the GT's performance envelope. The wheel and tire package alone saved significant unsprung weight compared to the standard Diablo. So, fastest naturally aspirated Diablo ever built. Sub 4 second, 0 to 60. 215 miles per hour claimed top speed. Launched in March 1999. What was the competition doing in 1999? Ferrari? The 550 Maranello, contemporary to the GT, offered a different philosophy entirely. 485 horsepower from a 5.5-liter V12, front-engine layout, claimed 199 miles per hour top speed. Faster than most cars on Earth, slower than the GT. And fundamentally a grand touring car, not a homologation special. Porsche? The 993 GT2 had ended production in 1998. The 996 GT2 wouldn't arrive until 2001. There was a gap. The GT existed in that gap. Pagani? The Zonda debuted at the same Geneva show in March 1999. 12 prototypes and early production cars over the next few years. Beautiful. Rare. Single-digit production initially. Not really competition in any volume sense. So the GT sat alone. The fastest naturally aspirated mid-engine V12 supercar you could actually buy in volume. Well, 83 units. In 1999. Miracles do happen. Apparently when Germans own the paperwork, but haven't reached the engine bay yet. Let that marinate. The GT's existence was defined by timing. Lamborghini had been passed around like a business card at a networking event. Chrysler owned it from 1987 to 1994. Megatech, an Indonesian investment group, bought it in 1994. Audi acquired Lamborghini in September 1998. The GT was developed from roughly 1997 through 1998 under Megatech ownership. Engineering, testing, homologation, all completed before Audi's acquisition finalized. March 1999 rolls around. The GT debuts at Geneva. By this point, Audi technically owns Lamborghini. But the GT isn't an Audi project. It's the last purely Italian Lamborghini engineering effort, developed, finalized, and homologated before German integration began. After the GT, Audi's influence would grow. The Murcielago, which replaced the Diablo in 2001, would be more refined, more reliable, more German. The GT was the end of an era. The last time Lamborghini could build something this uncompromising without answering to Volkswagen Group quality control standards. Homologation requirements demanded that Lamborghini build road-legal versions to qualify the racing GTR. Hence, 83 road cars. Europe-only allocation, left-hand drive only. All 83 sold. All were delivered. Most, shockingly, are still running. Which means the GT was developed, engineered, and finalized before Audi showed up with clipboards and quality control standards. It launched under Audi ownership, yes, but it represented the last purely Italian engineering project. The last time Lamborghini could say, let's put a roof scoop on it, without a German engineer asking for 17 feasibility studies and a risk assessment. The last car where it works was considered sufficient documentation. The last project where passion budgets exceeded spreadsheet budgets. After the GT, Audi integration began. The Murcielago would be more refined, more reliable, more German. Better cars, objectively. But the GT was the last one that felt purely, unapologetically, we built this because we could and nobody stopped us, Italian. The racing side of the story. Lamborghini built 3 Diablo GTR race cars for GT1 class competition. These were not street legal. These were purpose-built race machines. More power, more aero, less weight, full racing specification. The GTR competed in the Diablo GTR Super Trophy series from 2000 through 2004. It also ran in Japanese GT500 competition. Results were mixed. The GTR was competitive but not dominant. The road-going GT existed to homologate the GTR. That's the entire reason 83 examples were built. Without the GTR couldn't race in GT1. So every GT owner effectively bought a homologation special. A race car with number plates, a slightly quieter exhaust, and the bare minimum equipment required to be street legal in Europe. The 6.0-liter V12 in the GT was fundamentally the same engine architecture Lamborghini had been refining since the Countach. Quad-cam, 48-valve naturally aspirated design, longitudinally mounted behind the cabin, driving the rear wheels through a 5-speed manual transmission. Peak power arrived at 7,100 RPM. Redline sat just beyond that. The engine was designed to be revved, hard, and often. Lamborghini tuned the intake and exhaust systems for maximum airflow at high RPM, sacrificing low-end torque for top-end power delivery. This was not a flexible, tractable engine for boulevard cruising. This was a naturally aspirated V12 optimized for one thing: maximum output when you buried the throttle and held on. And somehow, against all historical precedent and every reasonable expectation, it was disgustingly competent, annoyingly brilliant. The kind of naturally aspirated engine that made you question why anyone bothers with forced induction. 575 horsepower from 6 liters. That's 95.8 horsepower per liter, naturally aspirated. In 1999, modern naturally aspirated engines with variable valve timing, direct injection, and decades of additional development struggle to match that specific output. The GT's V12 did it with port fuel injection and fixed valve timing. Fuel consumption? Lamborghini didn't publish official figures. Period reports suggested single-digit miles per gallon under enthusiastic driving. Low teens on the highway if you were gentle. Emissions. This was homologated in Europe in 1999. It met European emissions standards. Barely. Catalytic converters were present. They worked, mostly. The roof-mounted air scoop, visually the GT's most distinctive feature, wasn't just cosmetic. It fed a dynamic air intake system, routing cooler air directly to the intake plenum under full throttle. Function over form, though the form certainly made an impression. Aerodynamics were aggressive. The GT featured a large rear wing, adjustable for downforce and drag balance. The carbon fiber rear diffuser channeled air from underneath the car, generating significant downforce at speed. Front splitter and side skirts managed airflow along the body. The entire aerodynamic package was designed for high-speed stability, critical when you're approaching 215 miles per hour with rear-wheel drive and no electronic nannies. Interior: stripped. Race seats. Minimal sound deadening. Carbon fiber trim throughout. The GT made no pretense of being a comfortable grand tourer. This was a homologation special, and the interior reflected that purpose. Air conditioning was optional. Power windows were standard, surprisingly. The radio, if optioned, was an afterthought. You weren't buying a GT to listen to music. You were buying it to listen to a naturally aspirated V12 at 7,000 RPM. Automotive press at the time noted that Valentino Balboni, Lamborghini's chief test driver, reportedly needed a doppio espresso and a lie-down after his first high-speed run in the GT. Let me put that in context. This is Valentino Balboni, the man who'd been Lamborghini's primary test driver since the early 1970s, who'd thrown Countach's sideways through mountain passes for decades, who'd spent his entire career piloting mid-engine Italian supercars with no traction control, no ABS in early years, and power delivery best described as violent. And the GT, the car we're discussing, made Balboni need caffeine and rest. That's not a complaint. That's not weakness. That's the automotive equivalent of a Navy SEAL saying, "That roller coaster was intense." From a man whose job description was literally, "Drive dangerously fast cars, dangerously fast for quality control purposes." If Balboni needed espresso, you should probably bring a helmet, and a priest, and maybe reconsider your life insurance policy. Take a breath. Production ended in 2000, 83 units total. No additional examples were built. The Diablo line would continue with other variants, the VT, the SV, but the GT remained a one-time, 83-unit homologation special. Why did production stop at 83? Homologation requirements were met. the GTR race program was running. There was no business case for building more road-going GTs beyond the minimum required for racing eligibility. Lamborghini had achieved the goal: qualify the GTR for GT1 competition. Mission accomplished. Production ceased. The Dodge Viper GTS, contemporary American competitor, offered 450 horsepower from an 8-liter V10, claimed top speed, 192 miles per hour, 0 to 60, roughly 4 seconds, close to the GT in acceleration, significantly slower at the top end, and fundamentally a different philosophy. American muscle applied to a 2-seat sports car rather than Italian exotic mid-engine V12 theater. The GT existed in a specific moment. March 1999 to 2000. European allocation only, 83 units. A homologation special built to satisfy racing regulations, then discontinued once those regulations were met. It was never meant to be a long production model. It was meant to be a race car with license plates, built in minimum quantities, sold to customers who understood exactly what they were buying, then retired once its purpose was fulfilled. The Diablo GT remains the fastest naturally aspirated Diablo Lamborghini ever built. That title is uncontested. No subsequent Diablo variant matched or exceeded the GT's performance. The Murcielago that followed in 2001 was faster, but it used all-wheel drive, significant Audi engineering input, and represented a different generation entirely. Lamborghini built 83 examples. All Europe-only allocation, all sold, all driven. Most of them, shockingly, still running. Current valuation, between 700,000 and over €1 million, which means the 83 people who bought these new for roughly $300,000 are either investment geniuses or just got incredibly, impossibly lucky by buying the one Italian supercar from the 1990s that didn't require a second mortgage for maintenance, probably both. To put that in perspective, you could have bought a Ferrari 550 Maranello instead. Probably saved money on insurance. Definitely saved money on explaining to your insurance company why you need coverage for a car with a roof scoop, no traction control, rear-wheel drive, 575 horsepower, and an Italian electrical system. But you'd have been wrong. Because the GT appreciated, the 550 depreciated, the market has spoken, and the market says, when the Italians accidentally build something brilliant, buy two. 83 cars, all accounted for. Most in private collections, some still driven on track days. A handful appear at auctions occasionally, where they command premium pricing from collectors who understand exactly what the GT represents. The last purely Italian Lamborghini supercar. The fastest naturally aspirated Diablo. A homologation special that actually worked as advertised. The GT's legacy isn't measured in sales volume or production years. It's measured in what it achieved. A naturally aspirated V12 supercar that could genuinely reach 215 miles per hour, hit 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds, and do it all without electronic driver aids or all-wheel drive systems. The Murcielago that followed in 2001 was objectively better in most measurable ways. More power, more refinement, more reliability. But the GT was the last Diablo and the last Lamborghini, built before Audi's full integration transformed the company from Italian chaos into German precision. Better? Probably. More interesting? That's debatable. So here's what the GT proved, that Lamborghini, even in the messy final years of pre-Audi ownership, even while being passed between corporate parents like a liability nobody wanted, could still build something genuinely world-class when the goal was clear and the constraints were minimal. 83 units. Naturally aspirated V12, 215 miles per hour, sub-4-second acceleration, no excuses, no compromises. Just Italian engineering doing what it does best when nobody's watching the budget too closely. The Diablo GT, the last of its kind. The fastest naturally aspirated Diablo ever built. A title that will remain uncontested, because Lamborghini never built another one. This is Supercar Chronicles, where we celebrate the cars that rewrote the rules, even when nobody was paying attention.